Testing. Oh. Testing. 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 It's not starting yet. We're just. Testing. How's that? How's that? Better? Okay.
Check. Test. How's that volume there? Okay. How's that there? That's better. Yeah. Can you hear me at the back okay? Thumbs up? Thumbs up or up the volume? Up the volume? Ooh. Okay, how's that now? How's that volume now? Thumbs up at the back? It's the wrong way. We're going to turn it around. It looked like it was pointing away from me. There you go. How's that now? Is that better? Yeah. Yeah? Okay. If I speak right into it, it's all good, right? We're about there. Okay. I'll just tie that string to the mic so I don't move. All right. I think we're ready to get started. Welcome, everybody, to the inaugural Creative Grove event on the... Yes! Hopefully the first of many here at the Trinity Church on the unceded territories of the Hepetcheseth and Sishat First Nations people, who we're very grateful they share their land with us. I'm just here to do a very brief introduction. My name is Derek Hannibury. For those of you who don't know me, I know most of you, I know, but a few unfamiliar faces, great to see. I'm here to introduce the creative genius behind this event and behind many other things that are happening in Port Alberni. I don't know whether the community is quite aware of all the things that Colton Nelson does in this community, but we are very grateful that he's chosen to be here in Port Alberni, to put his publishing house here in Port Alberni, to publish many local authors and authors from the region, and his other creative endeavors, this being one of them, that will hopefully create a real nexus of energy here around the literary scene in Port Alberni, and not just the literary scene, just the creative scene. So people are invited to come. There will be featured readers every month, but there will also be musicians, comedians, etc. But I'm going to let Colton tell you about that. For now, I just want to introduce Colton Nelson of RCN Media. Colton, where are you hiding? Come on out. Let's have a big round of applause for him.
Hello. What? Hello. Is that better? Hi, I'm Colton. I am a local book publisher here. I've been publishing here since 2015, sort of, but full-time since 2019. We've done a lot of great things, like Derek Hanbury's 2 of his books. We've done also Shelley Penner, who's sitting right there. She did her Haven Hold series, a great series. And we've published a lot of people in Port Alberni. I could probably go on forever, but that'd take up the whole evening. And we've also published outside of Port Alberni, and we've gone to Nanaimo, Parksville, and Victoria. We have a Nanaimo author or illustrator, Julian Grogrot, and we have Peter McGuire, who's from Victoria, and Mary Waltz, and lots of just different types of creators all over the island, and we expect to expand far beyond that. We're actually one of the biggest book publishers on Vancouver Island by pure volume. I think this year alone we'll be publishing over 37 books from the local Canada. Part of my goal is to kind of, exploit in a way the creativity that's been happening here in Port Alberni that hasn't been done before. So with book publishing and also giving people an outlet, which is why we're kind of launching this thing once a month here. We're trying to make it very accessible, so we are live streaming it just so everybody does know. So you don't actually have to attend. It'll also be on demand afterwards, as well as you can come here, and it's all 100% free. And it always will be. We just ask that if you do have a little bit to support creators, we will always try and have books available for them. in the back. We'll also have our own books and things like that there. This isn't an event just for my authors that I publish. This is also an event for everybody else. So if you do want to feature a book or something like that here, give me a shout. You can go to thecreativegrove.ca, and all the information will be there. As well as we'll be having open mics, which will be available. You guys can come up here and attend after the event. I think that's pretty much it, unless anybody has any questions. Perfect. Tonight we have 3 books that we're going to be kind of launching. I have Winters, which, do you mind standing up, Winter? I think most of you all know Winter here. Winter Darby. Winter is a very creative artist that actually was tutoring me in college back in the day, and boy, did that not go well. For him, I mean, it was perfect for me. We also have here Mary Waltz, you're over there, if you want to stand up. And Mary is a Victoria author who wrote in one of my favorite genres, which is fantasy. She has this book called Firebrand, which is really great. It's actually become our #1 best-selling book, outbeating Shelley Penner, actually, who is our second #1 best-selling author. And then we also have Peter and Julian, if you guys don't mind standing up. So each person will have about between 10 minutes to half an hour to kind of present their content that they might wish. We do have a projector here, which is for, I think everybody's using it. And feel free to ask questions and engage. This is an event for everybody. Oh yes, there's that too. And we also, by the way, are having a suggestion box, which I'll be setting up after this. So if you guys have any suggestions for the future, we wish to essentially have a cheap concession and things like that going on, and any sort of ideas. So feel free to make suggestions. Winter will be starting off, and then we'll go into Julian and Peter back there with their book, and then we'll finally end with Mary. And then afterwards, we'll take about maybe a 10 to 15-minute break, and then we'll have an open mic if anybody wants to share any sort of creativity they have. I do have one rule, is that if you are going to leave when the open mics are happening, please wait until the person's done and then go after. They're only really allotted about 5 minutes, so it's just a couple extra minutes to wait, so that way they don't feel like they're scaring you away. All right, perfect. And here is Winter.
Good evening, Port Alberni. How are we doing tonight? Wrestling with the mic. I am absolutely delighted to see all of you here today, coming out to support the arts and local artists and authors. So I wanted to do something a bit different for what to say while I'm up here. Behind me on the screen, yeah, it's working. You can see the process of 2 paintings of Cressida coming to life. There we go. You can see it dance and flicker and come to life as it transforms from the blank canvas to the final piece. And that's part of what I want to talk about for a little bit. The dreams behind the Dream Warrior and how I've made them come to life. But first, I do want to read to you a little bit from the book to get warmed up. To set the scene, this is our heroine, Cressida, as she is attempting to cross from one dream to another. It is a dangerous and fiddly thing crossing the place between. Cressida remembered what she had been taught. Time to some is like a string, one dimension woven ring. Only forwards, never back. All the others they do lack. 2 dimensions others be, still within time flow as you see. Yet when it comes to you and me, we are ants upon the strand. Thread the dream round your own hand, and fold the string, hold it fast. Now the ant has its way past. Never linger in the place between. Step across it quickly and unseen. It was done. The portal was opened. Cressida took a deep breath and stepped into the portal. Cressida stepped through the place between and into Dream 0433. Her first sensation was of hot tar, putrid gases, and a very loud noise. Her second was the sight of some enormous mechanical thing hurtling towards her, eating the space between them as it came, impossibly fast. On its alien, armored face was a gleaming metal muzzle. Cressida let go of the dream in shock as he stepped backwards, and the strand of time flow in her grasp recoiled and snapped back into place. The world lurched, gasping like the ground itself was surprised. The road between Cressida and the mechanical beast suddenly rippled like a ribbon, then yawned open into a chasm with hot pavement walls. The two dreams were briefly side by side, forest bridge and city road mere feet away from each other. Then the worlds flung themselves apart as the time flow settled. Cressida was left in the place between, uncounted miles away from either dream. Sorry about Mike. She had felt the freezing darkness before, but only as a brief shock when passing through the place between. Now, the darkness was so absolute that she could barely breathe, so cold and stifling that flying was only a desperate desire. Cressida fell like a stone, heart racing, gasping for air. The metal beast was nowhere to be seen, but she had bigger problems now. Her hair streamed above her limply, useless to her in this oppressive void. The first layer of the place between was filled with many doors, doors to houses and bathrooms and prison cells and offices. They all floated aimlessly, illuminated in the closing beam of light as the portal closed above her falling form. Long, long she fell, past the layer of doors, past the ruined stonework of some lost castle that must have been swallowed whole by some marauding entity, past hungry things that she could feel but not see. So that's a teaser, a little bit of the book. But of course, you'll have to read the book if you want to know how that predicament ends for Cressida. Now, I'd like to talk about bringing dreams to life. I've always dreamed, pun intended, of telling a story that communicated some of these wild and wonderful worlds that I see, that I try to bring to life through my art. And I wrote this book a little bit upside down and backwards. I started with the art. I illustrated the moments that I so clearly saw to bring those dreams from my head to yours. And as Cressida herself had more to say, the story came together around those moments. This thing needs to be taller. Why Cressida, you might ask? Why a plump nudist warrior lady? Cressida in her journey emerged very gradually. It began with wanting to make a coloring book, and at first the book was just going to be a small collection of random line drawings. But then a tangle of images began to coalesce into something more. I saw these fierce, plump ladies standing their ground against these colossal monstrosities. Some simply refused to back down. Others actively hurled themselves into those gaping maws, wearing nothing but a scream of defiance. And gradually a character came forth, Cressida. Cressida took charge of the book and made it clear she had a story to tell. One thing that made me really want to go with her, with Cressida, and the story she wanted to tell, out of all my ideas, all my possibilities, was how much the world lacked a character like her. When was the last time anyone saw someone like Cressida as the main character? The closest one I can think of, that's recent and popular, is Louisa from Encanto. If you know of others, please let me know so I can go check them out. Cressida. Plump and strong female heroines in particular are few and far between in our culture's media. It seems like every story that's mainstream enough to be promoted and widely consumed reduces plump ladies to comedic value, has them as sidekicks or villains, or simply ignores their existence. We have our fierce leading ladies, to be sure, when they're not simply written as the leading man's love interest, but there almost seems to be a deal being struck. They can be rebellious, but only if they're petite and pretty, and they certainly can't question any status quo that isn't cartoonishly evil. But here's the thing. These writers and producers and people who decide which dreams to fund for the big screen, they're missing out. We have so many people in this world whose bodies are as large as their hearts, people who are breaking the chains of generational curses and unjust systems, or simply being themselves, while the wider world dismisses them for not being the right shape. They are loving and living and existing in a world that tells them to be smaller, to be less, a world that tells them to be ashamed of themselves for themselves, to be manageable. Well, I say, screw that. I say, here's Cressida. She's 8 feet tall, she's thick, and she's got the kind of strength that it takes to tackle her own demons head on, or to hurl an empty school bus at some Lovecraftian monstrosity that is trying to devour an apartment complex. And and in a culture where seeing our own human bodies in full is shocking, where seeing even so much as a nipple is more shameful and taboo than any act of immorality or violence, Cressida draws power directly from her body being bare beneath the stars. She stands, in other words, much like she does against the vast and writhing monsters from the place between, as a symbol of courage, standing against the grotesquely magnified mouths of hate. It had to be Cressida. As soon as she spoke up, I knew that this book would be about the story she had to tell. I also wanted to mention the monsters briefly. They are the primordial creatures of the space between, the monsters between the worlds. Besides simply being enormous fun to draw, and slaveringly to the monsters might just be my favorite subject matter, they're also an exploration of an idea I've been working with for some time. Basically, my idea is that these monsters are formless beings that are all attempting to manifest in human forms. But because of their nature, they only understand the dark parts of human nature. They understand humanity about as clearly as I understand how to titrate a quadratic formula in chemistry class. And so when they manifest as an incarnation of our hate, our selfishness, our blind hypocrisy and savage vengeance. This is why they are largely made up of human parts, why they share such grotesquely gleeful and tortured expressions. As shrewdly as they might understand our basest elements, they completely miss all the other parts of being human. And so from these two elements, Cressida and the monsters she does battle with, came the story of Cressida as the dream warrior, fighting to save realities that exist in the mind of a tree. Okay, that's still playing. To save those realities from nightmares incarnate that seek to devour all that exists in the light. So that is the dream that I have spun and shaped and set upon paper. And to shamelessly self-plug for a moment, if you haven't got your copy, you can pick one up today from the table over there. Okay, next part. See, I've shared a bit about my book. Okay. Yeah? Yes, thank you. All right, here we go. This is where I get to why there's this time lapse being played. Okay, as artists and authors, we struggle with the blank page. We put something down, consider how it looks, and immediately erase it. We try out another idea, another dozen ideas, another 24 ideas. But to our audience, it seems as if it was just a step towards an inevitable conclusion. They see the final book, the final piece of art, and never the meandering journey to get there, never the crumpled pages that fall in our battle against the blank page. It is through this struggle that our dreams come to life. The artist works all their life to chip away that marble block between the mind and the hand, trying to get to that point where they can beam their thoughts and ideas into everyone else's heads. From the first storytellers around the fire, all the way to this heady whirlwind of modernism, we have traveled as a people, following as we went the dreams of those who imagined more than what was literal and familiar, more than their own day-to-day lives. Perhaps if the ants could paint art on the walls of their colonies, they would have overtaken us long ago. But it is us who have aspired, us who have dreamed of the impossible, until one day the impossible was now mundane. Our creativity is an essential part of our humanity. And we have been reminded of that vividly over these long, strange months that have been the last 2.5 years. Who was it that we turned to when the world turned itself inside out? When the world turned inside itself and the old bonds and rules were cast aside? Why, it was the artists and their dreams. It was Netflix, it was Disney Plus, it was Hulu. It was those channels, these mediums, where thousands of artists come together to bring their visions to motion and life. We are floating on the current of dreams, and I am delighted to have brought mine to you to show you, if you will, other worlds than these. Okay, last part. Okay. And now I want to mention the other dream, the one that I'm now preparing to pursue as far as I can go. You might have picked up by now, I really love making art. It's a passion that has remained constant through my other constantly shifting interests. I've always loved trying to get through the marble block between my mind and my hand to set down my visions onto paper clearly enough for other people to see them. I've slowly shifted my focus over the last while. I used to be more focused on getting into a career in neuroscience or psychology, getting right into the gritty details of the human brain. But more and more, two things became clear. First, that those careers are, ironically, biased towards neurotypicals. And second, and much more importantly, that art was the one thing I was truly passionate about on a consistent basis. I've never stayed up till 4 a.m. reading about the caudate nucleus and the role it plays in sorting memories. I've never come home from a long day at work and immediately started mapping out the reticular formation. But I have done those things for art. I've spent 10 hours working on one image, trying to get the hands to express some crucial human emotion, and had it feel like 2 hours. I've stayed up till dawn writing poetry because those were the hours I could conduit the visions without distraction. I've spent consecutive weeks of my life bitterly trying to improve one aspect of my art and still loved it with all my heart. And through all the shifting passions and lovers and obsessions, art remains my constant. It took me a while to arrive at that conclusion, but now I know art is what it's all about for me. Recently, I got accepted to Emily Carr, and it was like a sign from the universe. Thank you. And it was like a sign from the universe, a call to adventure, if you can, Joseph Campbell. It was a clear message from the world, now or never. Follow your dream or stay here and wonder what it might be like to do so. No, it's still playing. I'm leaving this September to follow my dream. And if things work out, maybe my dreams will reach millions of people one day. All the money I'm making right now from working on the farm and selling these books is going into funding my time at Emily Carr. But I want to close with a remark on this town, on this wonderful community that I'll be leaving. Port Alberni is a town of many things. It's a town where the roads are wide enough to take 4 logging trucks shoulder by shoulder, and yet not big enough for the both of us at the stoplight. It's a town where it rains. We're not short on rain in these parts. And of course, it's a town where when we ask, how's the hump? People will stop to talk about how wet the hump is. I dare you to walk up to someone who isn't from Port Alberni and ask them how wet the hump is. It's a town with radio plays and stage productions and poetry readings and once upon a time staged train robberies. And that's the part I really love about Port Alberni. While the river that flows mainstream here might be the color of blue-collar nostalgia for bygone days, there's a lot of truly brilliant gems in the stream bed. There's a real vitality hidden among the peeling paint and empty storefronts, a connection that's real and vivid. And in that hidden world of vitality, I have found my people. And the love and support they have shown me has allowed me to dream big, dream bold, and even to share my dreams with all of you. So thank you. Thank you, people of Port Alberni. I couldn't have done it without you.
Winter is by far one of the favorite people I've ever had to work with, though I don't think he'll say the same. He's been a delight, and his book is, again, not to be pushy, it is available in the back, and you guys can purchase it. I think it's $25, and if you get another book as well, they're all like $20, something like that. Winter, hey, Winter. We will all miss you when you leave, just so you are aware. And you better come back and visit. And you better visit everybody. Next up is Julian and Peter. Do you guys mind standing up for a minute and coming up here? And do you guys give them a round of applause? Julian and Peter are a great duo. I would compare them to a Penn and Teller. And I recently, a few months ago, about 6 months ago, received a random email in my inbox from Peter about publishing his book that he had recently self-published. And I've known Peter because he's done a lot. He's done writing. I think you were an English teacher, weren't you? I was. Yeah, he was an English teacher. Was he working with you, Derek? Yeah, okay. And do you okay over there? And so I read over and over, and I was very delighted with it, and I was very thrilled to work with them and to give their book a big facelift. And do you have the book right there?
We do. I'll just show it to everyone, or do you want to do that?
Yeah, I'll show it. This is The Art of 12. It's a fantastic book, and I'm sure they will tell you a lot about it as they're up here. And do you have anything else you want me to add? Perfect. This is Peter, and Julian will be on the computer, and working his magic. And though he may be quiet, he's one of the most brilliant people I've ever met.
Thank you, Colton. Hello, everyone. It's very nice to be part of this. It's a wonderful event, and it's going to be a great series that's happening with this being the first installment of the Creative Grove. And more power to you, Port Alberni. Julie and I met years ago in Port Alberni when both of us were living here. Since then, I've moved to Victoria and he's moved to Nanaimo. So although we're collaborators, we have never collaborated from the same location. We've always shipped things back and forth through the internet. And the result of our collaboration, of course, as Colton mentioned, is our first child. It's The Art of 12. And we're very pleased with it. It's very pleased with it. Just a little bit more volume is what he's saying, I think. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the nature of collaboration. I know that Winter is a brilliant solo artist, and we have found a way of working together which can produce an art in its own right. Collaboration is not a given. It's something that people have to learn how to do, and we've been very fortunate to be patient with each other and find a way to work together and produce something of interest. This, as Colton has mentioned, this is a re-release of a book in a fine, glowing, enlarged format through RCN Media. And as collaborators, Julian and I have come from quite different disciplines. We've come from different generations even. If you just look at the color of our hair, it demonstrates that. And we live and work in different cities, but that hasn't stopped us. This book has been a first for both of us. Together, we started more or less from scratch, aware only that we would not be creating a children's book as such, even though it's called The Art of 12. If you think of The Art of 12 as a kind of metaphor, an open metaphor for something, well, you can imagine what it might be. That's where the reader comes in. We did not shy away from time-honored visual books as a benchmark for our own efforts, and we understood that we were basically involved in a medium of interplay, a kind of show and tell, if you like. And we've done so equally as much as possible. In other words, the illustration doesn't serve the story. The illustration is as much the story as the words. We understood that from the very start, right? It's important that we've been a team. We learned along the way that many valuable discoveries are made simply by doing things together. One of these discoveries is about the open and flexible nature of collaboration as such. Another being our potential and growing enthusiasm for continuing this kind of work. So I'm not sure if you see the cover. The cover is actually a painting that Julian showed me years ago, before we ever thought of writing a graphic novel together. He is a talented visual artist, a graphic artist and a musician, and so I was familiar with his work even before the notion of working together was on the horizon. I said, I love that. It's a beautiful sort of inversion of what we normally think of, you know, a field with the city beneath it cracking open like an egg or what have you. And he says, well, you can use it at some point if you ever write a book. And so I kept it in mind, and I was determined at some point, if I ever wrote a book, that would be the cover. And so it is. And so maybe we'll open up the book and proceed now to see what's inside. Through the art of manipulation, we'll advance this screen, hopefully. That's okay. There we are. That's a table of contents, right? The book is divided into two sections, section 1 and 2, representing roughly two seasons in the life of a young person, a spring and a summer. The first set of titles is the sections of spring, followed by the second section on the next page, the sequence of summer. And yet, you know, the table of contents is quite deceiving because it's the last thing you ever write, right? You don't start with a table of contents. You might start with a picture for a cover, but you never start with a table of contents because you never know where it's going to go. So as we proceed to the first episode in section 1, it's called Spring Thaw. Spring Thaw is actually an early memory I had as a child of seeking out something that I saw under the rotting banks of snow as springtime hit the prairies. I saw a bright and glowing ball out on the snow bank, and I was determined to reach for it because that's what kids do. bare earth in sunlight, running home from school across the last melting snow. I just gave him those 3 lines and he came up with these wonderful images. You can imagine if I tried to tell a story without them. The next page. Into our backyard. The bright green ball catches my eye. Probably been there all winter, under all the snow. Moving towards it across the mud. I make it as far as my knees. The ball is still there. And that quite often is one of those frustrating experiences we have as children, that we reach for things that are beyond our grasp and sometimes we never quite make contact. The next section is a little bit more color for the world in which we find this young lad. 2 letters that turn up in the mail one day at his home. The first is addressed to him, and we find his name is Jude, and it's a letter from his mother. A letter from his mother which reveals that she's not living at home. Now, I tried to write this letter as though she was not talking down to him, because that was not her intent. It was her intent to communicate, and yet the language was somehow betraying her in a way. I don't know what he made of this letter when he received it. Hello, Jude. How are you, my dear boy? I often spend quiet time with the family drawings you have recently sent. Thank you. It is amazing how each of us, Auntie Sonia, your cousins, and I, can recognize such strong resemblances among ourselves. That they're from your hand makes them all the more special. I'm so glad when you write to me, explaining your interest in drawing. It is so important because each of us must try to find a way of seeing both the change and the constancy that surrounds us in this life. So your letter explaining this has touched me very deeply. Thank you for sharing your sense of why keeping some account is important to you. It is precious to me because I agree with you that not everything can always be clear on the surface. Would I feel it here in my heart if your words were at all strange to me? My dear one, I miss you so much. We will be together again soon. Until then, be good to Daddy. Be good company for each other. Love you, Mommy. Now, the way parents speak to children is quite often different from the way they speak to each other as spouses, and we see some of that in the next letter, the second of the pair. Dear Tom, please excuse my seeming silence. Yesterday was the first day in a while that I've had to myself. There has been a long string of immediacies to take care of. First was finding Sonia and the kids a safe place to live, and then there was the move itself. The new address is apartment 10, 3560 La Roche. It's quite a small place, but light and enough for the time being. I read and reread your letters many times, husband. I must be looking for something. Thank you for your support during these past several months. I know it was a sudden departure. Remember how I used to nag you with my concerns about my sister? And now, here we are, here and there. I just received a letter from my mother, too, absolutely furious. She imagines me somehow staying with my sister indefinitely. What is going to become of Tom and the little Jude? She asks, calling this a hollow period. She has always been worried for us, I guess. I don't understand why you can be in Montreal for 3 months. Sonia hasn't told her anything about the marriage troubles. Take very, very good care of our boy Jude and yourself. I may try to phone you. Yes, I know you don't like it, But meanwhile, write to me again and at great length. Je t'embrasse, Layla. So there we have the voice of a woman as mother and as wife. 2 letters that turned up in the mail of Jude's house one spring morning. And then later that day, we see Jude upstairs in his room, busy with his artwork in the land of 9,000 years. This piece of artwork actually comes from a remnant of a work that Julian was involved in back in his early years, and he kept it for many years and said, why don't we include it as part of our graphic novel? And so you see that we put things together as an invention. We didn't know where it was going, so the table of contents we started with at the beginning of this book is a bit of a deception, because we didn't know quite where this was leading us. But now we have a young boy, and he has parents, and his parents have troubles, and now there's a little bit of explaining that needs to be done, because children need to understand, or they try to, even though sometimes they fail. I want to go in that building, go in. I have to get in there. It feels like this building is going to blow up. A hatch. This is the land of 3,000 years. And this is the land of 5,000 years. But I want to find the land of 9,000 years. It could be just behind that blackboard. Yes, it's there. The beach goes on forever. Jude, dinner's ready. Just a little bit longer, Dad. Come now. Ah! How was school today? All right. Nothing new? Not really. How's the drawing? Anything new happening there? Just some mutant stuff. More milk? Yes, please. How did my mail get opened? It was an accident. It was addressed to me. I saw the handwriting and I got mixed up. What does that mean? I thought it was to both of us. Well, sometimes it is, and sometimes it might not be, son. Sorry, Dad. She doesn't talk much about coming back. We both know she's coming back. How do we know? Come on now. Eat more dinner. If she wasn't coming back, you'd tell me, right? Don't talk like that. Anyway, I need some new shoes. What's wrong with your shoes? They don't fit me anymore. So that's just a little taste of Jude's painful spring. Yes, it's wonderful, isn't it? Well, let's hope that his summer is better. Let's hope that Jude's summer is better. He has 2 seasons in this book, and you're welcome to follow him through both of those. So as collaborators, that's something of what we have come up with. and we hope you enjoy it. We certainly were very pleased to work on it together. I'd like you to think of the art of collaboration here as being another way that people can make art, right? Another way that people can make art. You don't necessarily have to be independent and isolated, but it's important to work within community. Even if you don't have direct collaborators, have feedback from others, as long as it's positive and encouraging and useful to you. Certainly we've found that. There's nothing formulaic or predictable in the meeting of words and images when you bring them together. I never thought I'd ever write a graphic novel. I thought I would write a novel of some sort, but not a graphic novel. But bringing words and images together somehow revealed more to me, and hopefully to you, Julian, in our efforts to work together. I think it's been it's very, very worthwhile. Something about the connection or the relationship between words and images, which is very familiar and very approachable. It's almost like a Venn diagram, like they belong together. Like the two of them, when they come together, they produce another color, right? You have a yellow and a blue, and when they cross over, they produce a green, like the green ball of Jude's discovery in that spring field of snow. I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking that we have to leave time now for Mary and for the open mic, so it's coming up to 8. We're very pleased to be part of this event, and thank you for being welcoming and attentive to our presentation here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter and Julian. That was great. Their books are also at the back as well. I would like to introduce Mary Waltz. Do you want to give her a round of applause as she walks up? Mary is a young, at heart, author from Victoria, and she's got this brilliant novel called Firebrand. Do you have it with you, by the way? Perfect. Mary, I don't really know much about you, sorry. I barely know her, so it's kind of awkward. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it with you. So I'll just leave it with you. Oh, okay. Do you need help with that? Just wait for the technical difficulties.
Oh, thanks.
No problem.
Hang on. I got it. Hi, everyone. As Colton says, my name is Mary Waltz. I'm an author from Victoria, and I've recently published my novel Firebrand through RCN Media, and it's been a real whirlwind. Like, back in September, I didn't know RCN Media existed, and here I am now. So it's been finding a publisher on Vancouver Island has been quite a challenge, and I'm really, really grateful that I happened to stumble across these people, because not only do I now have a novel, but I've made some pretty cool friends along the way and learned a lot. So anyway, I want to talk to you guys about my writing journey and how I went from just being a little kid who liked writing stories to being where I am now, a published author. And I'd also like to share a bit about my writing process. And hopefully I'll have time to read from my book for you as well. Sorry. What was that? You better believe it. It's water. So, people often ask writers when they first started crafting stories, and for me, it was when I was about 8. So, tell me if this works. I gotta make sure this PowerPoint thingy or Canva is working. Hey, there we go. That was me. I was, to put it nicely, an odd child. I was the clumsy kid with the Coke bottle glasses and no friends. But for large parts of my childhood, that didn't really bother me, because I was perfectly happy playing on my own with only my imagination and the characters I would create as company. They were way cooler than the kids at school. I began making imaginary friends a year or two before I started writing, so maybe when I was 6 or 7. And my first character of any significance was named Baby Bonnet. That's the family. She's a little one in the blue on the end there. Now, what she was like as a character, it changed many times over the years. I recall that she was so light she could fly, and she ended up in the hospital with all sorts of weird diseases from time to time. And other than that, though, she was basically this perfect, good little girl. And anything that I wanted to be was what Baby Bonnet was. So she changed a lot over the years. So initially, I spent a lot of my time pretending to be her and coercing my poor little sisters into playing the roles of her nowhere near as cool siblings. And when I was about 8, my parents brought their first home computer. It was one of those old, clunky numbers with the green and black screen, and that had a word processing program and a few games. They made me an account, and they showed me how to use WordPerfect. And pretty soon I was hammering out stories about Baby Bonnet and her family. There were more characters that followed Baby Bonnet. There was a family of 3 kids, the youngest of whom was murdered by her 2 older sisters for beating them in tennis. She miraculously came back from the dead, but would never play tennis again. I don't blame her. There was a bunch of triplets who were very, very different from one another. And then there was this family with 8 children who had an insufferably mean mother. And all of the stories were typed out on that computer and then printed off on our family's incredibly slow dot matrix printer. That's what one of my first stories looked like. So I don't think I realized I was actually good at writing until grade 6. Up until that point, I only knew that I enjoyed it. In grade 6, though, I wrote a story in school that caught the attention of my teacher. It was a 5-page long tale called The Disneyland Thief. My teacher posted it on the corkboard outside of our classroom for all to see, and I remember being incredibly proud of my work after spending so many years fumbling around in PE class and struggling to make friends. It was amazing to discover something I was good at. Interestingly enough, it was at about that time that my story writing outside of school began to wane. Looking back, I'm certain there were multiple reasons: increased homework, new interests and activities like baking and piano lessons and youth group meetings. I think the biggest reason, though, was that my preteen years brought something I hadn't really had before: good friends. I was still socially awkward, but I was no longer a complete loner, a target of nonstop teasing. And so I no longer needed the escape of writing stories about Baby Bonnet or any of my other imaginary friends. So my preteen years were the beginning of an over 10-year break from writing, with one notable exception in my mid-teens where I cranked out my first chapter story, and this one was about a kid who went to jail after accidentally killing a friend while driving drunk. It was a really, really weird story. After that, I was busy finishing high school, getting my first job, and going to college, and I definitely did think about writing in those years. In my early 20s, I started many stories, maybe wrote a chapter or 2, and then put them down, never to be picked up again. I'm not sure what shifted when I was 25. Maybe it was because I was finally out of school. Maybe it was because I'd finally gotten married, and thus checked off a large item on the good Christian woman's to-do list. But I certainly wasn't ready for the subsequent item of having kids, so I actually never got around to that item, but, you know. Maybe it was because the certainty of my younger faith was beginning to erode. I was certainly still a Christian. In fact, at that point, I ran a church youth group. But some big questions had wormed their way into my mind, and I needed an outlet for my questions and thoughts, and so I began to write a story. And I kept writing, and And one day I looked at the computer and I realized that I had finished a novel, or at least the first draft of one. That was a very exciting moment. I worked on that story more. I altered some of the characters, deleted a few of them completely, changed the entire story from third person to first person, and did a bunch more tweaking. And in the summer of 2009, I decided it was finished. I had written my first book, and thus The Crimson Door was born. Now, what to do with it? I was pretty sure I wouldn't be able to get it published. Hang on a minute. But I wanted to do something with it. I knew nothing about book publishing, so I decided to Google it, and that's how I discovered the world of online self-publishing. So I signed up for a service, I copied my book into their template, I did all the formatting myself, which I have been told by Colton was terrible. I picked out a cover design, and then I made a big announcement on Facebook about, oh, hey, I wrote a book, who wants a copy? And the response from people I knew was more significant than I expected. I think I sold 50 copies, mostly to people in my church, and a lot of the people seemed to love it. In fact, several people told me it made them cry, and when you're an author, that's a good thing. It's funny because looking back, I think The Crimson Door was actually pretty terrible. The plot was kind of lame and sappy, my writing wasn't that developed, my characters all talked the same, and my views on the subject matter have shifted significantly over the past 13 years. But writing that book provided the kick that I needed because it proved to me that yes, I can finish writing a book. It boosted my confidence in my own abilities. The Crimson Door was a personal turning point in my writing journey, so I'm just going to say here, if you're someone who has a book idea but you don't think it's going to get out there, you don't think it could get published, just finish writing it, then you're proving to yourself that I can write a book. So anyway, what did I do next? Well, obviously I wrote another book, right? That's what you do. This one was called Step on a Nail. And like The Crimson Door, it was very religious in nature, though much more lighthearted than its predecessor. I was trying to process some of the weird, hyper-charismatic Christian teachings of my youth at that time, and Step on a Nail was my way of working through my baggage. Like The Crimson Door, I self-published and distributed it. It was decently well received, and this took place at the beginning of 2010. 2010 was a tough year, though. I worked a job that really wasn't a good fit for me. I lost a very valued friendship. There was a very brutal murder that happened that year to a family member of some friends that left me reeling, and I was continuing to question the church and God and all that stuff, and all that put me in a less cheerful, more brooding frame of mind, which is why I think I began to write a very different story, one that was not at all lighthearted and not particularly religious. It was a story about a man with amnesia who began recovering his memories through dreams, only to discover that he was actually a murderer who had been sentenced to death, but instead of execution, he'd had his memory wiped and been placed in an insidious government program. I called this story Corey Stevens is Dead, and that one never made it into physical form, so I can't show you a cool cover. It was in early 2011 when I was just beginning my first rendition of that novel that an old classmate messaged me out of the blue and told me about the writing sites Wattpad and Bookrix. I checked them out and decided to post my new story, Corey Stevens is Dead, on Bookrix just to see what happened. Bam! Instant friends. Seriously, I made friends very, very quickly on Bookrix. The folks on that site were incredibly welcoming. I read other people's stories and commented on them, and many did the same for me. Bookrix happened to be running a short story contest soon after I joined, so I decided to try my hand at short story writing. And I won second place and $300. This, along with my newfound friends, was a huge confidence booster for me. See, 2011 was even harder for me than the previous year. I experienced my first ever bout of depression that year, and I swear that my friends on Bookrix were a large part of what got me through. Particularly my friendship with a young mom named Stevie from Texas with a similar background to my own. After my win, I stopped thinking about novels for a while and just focused on short stories. They were easier and quicker to write, they got more reads on Bookrix, and they allowed me to write with a certain flourish that novel writing often doesn't have. At the end of 2011, I entered another Bookrix contest with the short story called The Piper. By that time, my friendship with Stevie had become something significant to both of us, and I told her that if I won enough money, I'd buy a plane ticket to Texas and go visit her in person. Well, guess what? I won first place, and I got $500. So, true to my word, I headed to Austin in the spring of 2012, and I visited Stevie. That was quite exciting. Things slowly began to change on Bookrix, though, and by the time my husband and I moved to a different part of town in 2013, I'd all but stopped spending time on that site. Our moving to a different part of town, actually, you folks are island people, you probably would understand what I mean when I say we moved from Victoria to Sydney. Yeah. Moving to a different part of town, to Sydney, it coincided with me stepping away from church. I'd quit youth ministry the year before, and I was pretty burned out. My questions about my faith had become too persistent to ignore. And it was my own exploration of those questions that caused me to start novel writing again. And the resulting novel, Cascadian Storm, was described by my mother as a futuristic sci-fi romance with a hint of Stockholm Syndrome. I thoroughly enjoyed writing this book. But like all its predecessors, it just didn't feel like quite the right thing to submit to literary agents. So once again, I self-published and distributed it on my own. And a copy of this book also made its way into my local library. They have this little thing once a year where self-published authors can put their books in the library and they're featured, and that's what that picture is from. The first inklings of the story that would become Firebrand happened shortly after I finished Cascadian Storm. I'm a sucker for redemption stories, to the point where I once stayed up half the night finishing a novel series that I thought would have a redemption arc for a particular character, only to find out it didn't have that arc and be unable to sleep for the rest of the night because I was so disappointed. So anyway, I thought it would be interesting to write a redemption story that explores the ripple effects of one poor choice. I had an idea for the story in my head, but it wasn't very good. Not at all. It was cheesy, it was full of plot holes, it just didn't work, so I shelved the idea in my mind and I moved on. Fast forward to the summer of 2015. This was the year that I got into LARP, or live action role play. Do you guys know what that is? Yeah? Okay, good. Cool, okay. So my husband had been an avid LARPer for years, and by this point, a good number of his LARP friends had become my friends as well, so I decided to give it a try, and I was introduced to the world of Medieval Chaos Productions in Duncan. It's a great place. I spent a summer there running around in the woods, playing various characters, fighting goblins and casting spells and setting things on fire, all within the game system, of course. And it was that summer of nerdy fun that made me revisit my old story. What if, I thought, I took the base concept of that story and put it into a fantasy world? And thus Firebrand was born. So the main character I played at Medieval Chaos, this is her on this picture, her name's Kylina, and she's a wizard who had a bit of an obsession with fire. So I figured that having a main character with fire abilities was a good place to start, because I already kind of had some idea as to how to think with fire, because I had to do it as my character. So I began the process of planning out my novel. I wrote out a very rough outline, some basic character concepts, and important backstory details. I wasn't ready to actually start writing yet, though. I had an important trip coming up in early 2016. So I decided to just let the story concept sit and marinate for a few months. Hang on. Okay. In March of 2016, I took my first ever transatlantic trip, and I visited Scotland for 2 weeks. It was that trip that helped me envision the world in which Firebrand would take place. The incredible old buildings and cobbled streets of places like Edinburgh, Glasgow, and St. Andrews helped me envision what Sylvanborough, the city where the story begins, would look like. And my 3-day trip to the breathtaking Isle of Skye was inspiration for the Isle of Dundeer, which is another part of my story. The Shrouded Woods, however, were very much based on the tall, dense forest of Vancouver Island with some fantasy elements thrown in. So after returning from the trip, I dove into my writing. Unlike many writers, I'm not one who starts at the beginning of a story and writes sequentially. No, I tend to write scenes as they come to me. And this was the case with Firebrand. As per usual for me, the first scenes that I thought of were important conversations between characters. That's always what I think of first. Then I started writing the scenes where important backstory was revealed, so that way I wouldn't have to write it all down in my outline. And then I started writing other scenes as they came to me, and then eventually I got to the point where I had to fill in the gaps with all the scenes that connect everything together, which is honestly the most tedious part of it for me. And that's the point that I'm at right now with the sequel. Anyway, once my rough draft was finished, I began the editing process. And for Firebrand, it took about 6 months for me to have, actually maybe less than that, for me to have a somewhat edited rough draft finished. In the late summer of 2016, I let my friend's about 12-year-old daughter read it. And she was 12, 13, very much into Harry Potter. She read my story, and I let her read my story to see what a young teen would think of it. And she quite enjoyed it. And her mom overheard her talking to some friends about it and told me, which was, of course, a huge compliment. Following that, in the fall of 2016, I took a class via continuing studies at UVic that was about polishing your middle grade or young adult novel. And I met some wonderful people there. I learned a lot and got some valuable insights into my first few chapters. 2017 was a tough year for me. I wasn't in a good space for a large part of that year, and I did very little work on Firebrand at that time. I had officially reached the hard part. Finding a way into traditional publishing, this had always been a process that intimidated me. Things began to look up in 2018, but it wasn't till May that anything shifted. It was then that my friend Holly contacted me. Holly had gone to school for a writing degree and was working on a publishing course, and she and 2 other friends were interested in working in the same sorts of fields, and they were looking for a guinea pig to use their newly acquired skills on. So Holly and her friends Christine and Maya took Firebrand, and they gave me extensive feedback on the plot and the characters, and this is where the bulk of changes that I made to the manuscript took place. Their work helped me to turn it into something far, far better than it was originally. They also helped me with query letters and synopsis, and basically got me ready to start sending out queries. I queried about a dozen agents and publishing houses over the course of 2019. It was a process that was admittedly a bit discouraging. In late 2019, I ran into my friend whose daughter I had let read my book all those years before, and she told me that her daughter still talked about it. That gave me a bit of a kick in the pants, and it led me to reconnecting with her daughter, letting her read the updated version, and getting some feedback. And the new version made her cry, which, as previously stated, is a good thing when you're an author. And this inspired me to send out even more queries, all of which were met with rejections. Then we get to 2020. Great fun. And with the onset of the pandemic came some serious writer's block. You would think that being locked up inside would be a great time to write, wouldn't you? But no, apparently not for me. Firebrand sat idle for the next year and a half while I was busy with other things. I would often think about it, and every now and then I'd send out a query or consider self-publishing. I knew I had to do something with it eventually. Both myself and others had put so much effort into it. It wouldn't be fair to just walk away from all that. And then, in October of 2021, I saw a Facebook post from a friend of mine about how her book had been picked up by this publishing company called RCN Media that I'd never heard of. And I thought, well, why not give this one a try? Why not give these guys a shot? One more try. And so I sent off my manuscript, and so it began. I signed a contract with RCN Media November 10th. I got to work. The months that followed were filled with long hours of editing, endless phone calls, and time working with my artist friend to fine-tune the map and the cover and all that. But eventually we completed the project and we sent the book to the printer. Now, there was only one thing left to do. My book was released on April 19th, and it just so happened that Colton and Abby were on their way down to Victoria to pick up a bunch of books, including mine, from the printer that day. So I got to spend the day with my publisher and his wife, both of whom I had never met before. Just talked to them on the phone a lot, you know. And we did a grand book unboxing at the hotel where I work. And I finally got to hold a copy of Firebrand in my hands, but not before Colton presented me with a series of elaborate prank books, complete with a blurred cover, a book description in French. You want to show this off, Colton? You're going to be my book model? Yeah, just pass it around. The entire inside is written in wingdings, and the entire how do I say this? The inside of the book is in backwards and upside down, as you can.
Some of them are. The printer decided to have fun.
Yeah, Colton basically just told the printers to have a field day and do all the things that they secretly wanted to do to other people, to me, and apparently I made their day. So I'm glad that turned out, but it was a little nerve-wracking for me.
I didn't spend like $10,000 there, so that also made their day.
That too, yeah. So anyway, after that we visited a few bookstores to promote Firebrand. I finished the evening off with a dinner with friends, and now I'm here. So the last few months have been extremely busy, but seeing my book in print, in the hands of friends, and as of 2 days ago, in a local bookstore, that was a first for me. It's been worth it, and I've learned a lot over these past few months and made some great friends, and I'm well on my way to finishing the sequel. So, yeah, hang on. How am I for time? What's that? Wrap it up? Okay, well, if you guys want to read part of my book, I guess you're going to have to buy it, because I was going to read a little bit, but you know. Anyway, thank you very much for having me here. This has been a great trip up to Port Alberni, and I'm really excited to be able to share with you tonight. Thank you.
If you want to hear her read, she can do it in the open mic if you guys want.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Though you kind of made it seem like I actually do know you. So we're going to take a quick break. I believe there's snacks in the back, if I'm right. Yeah? Is that right? Okay, and I believe they're free too, so go ahead back there. And we're going to take a quick break, and then Derek is going to come up and do a quick reading, and then whoever wants to share something, you have about 5 minutes, and you guys can line up over there. And yeah, just know that if you do a reading, that we will be posting clips onto YouTube, so just let me know ahead of time if you don't want that. And yeah, any questions? And this would be a great time to mingle with the authors and talk to them about their books and get them all signed and stuff like that. Have fun. Hello. Oh, wow. Hi. Sorry to interrupt everybody, but I know we've all been here for a while, and I thoroughly apologize, but I'd like to get started on the open mic part. Just a friendly reminder that there is a suggestion box if you have any suggestions that you guys would like to make. And anybody who would like to do a reading, if you guys don't mind coming up, and if everybody who's staying is able to just sit down and we can let the open mic people come up. And as Shelley's coming up, no, I forgot what I was going to say. Never mind. So if you want to do a reading from any of your work, it's about 5 minutes, and you can just take a seat on the bench there. And I might reorganize the order and stuff like that. And please be polite. And if you want to leave, just leave after somebody's gone and done their thing in between the two people. And there'll be time to mingle and that type of stuff after. And you good?
Okay, this is from my short story anthology, Random Words. And each of these stories were inspired by a series of random words that my writers group came up with. We each provided one word, so it was a very eclectic list each time. So I'm going to start kind of in the middle of this one story, since I've only got 5 minutes. Okay. Carmelita pinned the last of the laundry to the clothesline and rehung the basket on the wall inside the small pantry. She and her mother had the nicest house in all the village, small but sturdy and neatly kept. Carmelita's father, Pedro Ramos, had grown up hard with an abusive, angry father who demanded perfection. And Pedro had spent his entire life trying in vain to please him, to win his respect. But the old man finally went to meet his maker. When the old man finally went to meet his maker, rather than feeling a release, Pedro had experienced an inexplicable grief that sent him into a downward spiral. He began to drink, and when drunk, he seemed to become his father, violent, demanding, and impossible to please. Carmelita had clear memories of her mother, bruised and bleeding on the floor, humbled and begging him to stop. And from there, things had only gotten worse. Carmelita stepped outside with a full pitcher and watered her beloved flowers, tall spikes of pink dappled blossoms in a thick braid down the slender stalks. She considered joining her mother's sewing circle to sit in the shade and hear the latest gossip. But she felt so hot and sticky after spending the past hour in the humid heat of the communal laundry with its ancient Ringer washing machine that had seen more years than she had. She decided instead to walk down to the river for a swim. She changed quickly, then slipped her dress back on. She didn't want those men in front of the cantina ogling her in a bathing suit. She had felt their eyes on her as she crossed the square, slithering over her skin like insects sipping honey. They thought her sweet. They thought her pure and innocent. But they didn't know the secret she kept, even from her mother. They didn't know what she had done. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Rochelle Mecca. I'm going to be reading out of my book, Reverse Cycle Repeat. It's my second book of poetry. I have written 2, and I have yet to actually come and perform any poems from them because, one, I haven't really found a community. 2, I'm extremely shy, even if my poems actually have a little bit of oomph to them. So I'm going to be reading a poem this is the title poem to my book. It's me shooting a gun. My books are basically composed in pretty much the order that I wrote everything within the year. So my first one is like my poetry of 2020, and that was Chaos of Tao. This one is my poetry 2021. So the first day of 2021, my father took me to a shooting range in North Carolina. 9mm Beretta PX4 Storm. What's a poet to do in a shooting range? Initial shock, like loud sounds of walking into a war film. Film only because of controlled setting. Shell shock trembles through my nerves. Each blast rattles my body. Blink and shudder in a convulsive, involuntary response. My ears. I stare ahead at my target. Blast! This is not natural. Talking, learning, safety. Blast! Come again? Hold the gun, set it down, load 10 bullets. Click, ka-ching, ready, aim. Hear the firing, can't see the shot. Shell jumps back towards me. Initial shock at the shots! Entering the room, tears threaten me, but hold back. This is normal, not natural, but how many Americans have become comfortable with the sound? Bam! Don't cry, be strong. My own shot is comfortable. Focus on the target. Less fear. Awareness only. No fear. Watching. No shaking. 6 other stalls of shooters. Fire, 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 fire. My own amongst them. Less shell shock. Comfort at last. Awareness. Normalize. Bam! Fresh hot bullet shell jumps down my shirt upon my chest. Laugh as I chase it out. Gun safety, keep barrel pointed ahead. Not easy with one hand. Hot metal shell burning. Relief from the sound of my own bubbly giggle. Thank you.
Well, hello. I'm Robbie Vann. I'm a singer, songwriter, poet, an artist. Like most of us here, I spend a lot of time in my head, and stuff comes out. So I'll do. When I first came to Vancouver Island, I came out here. So I was 57. And I was very, very surprised to find that nobody gave me the evil eye, and nobody called me a fag or a tranny or any of that kind of nonsense. By the way, you want to call me a fag? Yes, I am one, and I'm great at it, so not to worry. But anyway, I'm going to do a piece of poetry that I thought was part of what I felt Vancouver Island was. Found a golden temple hideaway on a trail of dreams. Love when everything just slides my way in a living fantasy. Feel the power within dreams, well of wonder within me. I am crystal, I am fire, life from ruin, spark desire. Found a golden temple hideaway on a trail of dreams. Love when everything just slides my way in a living fantasy. No fear in the darkness, my anchor's no home. Tell that I'm under while writing this song. Place me in Eden, I'm reborn, bathed by the one light, no longer forlorn. Found a golden temple hideaway on a trail of dreams. Love when everything just slides my way in a living fantasy. Thank you. Now, I went to see my first Pride Parade after I came out, and I went to Victoria, and I see the parade come down the street, and the transgender people are leading the parade with a wonderful fairy in the front. And I started crying, and when I came home, I wrote, I once lived in a world between where the world was blue and I was green, and the names they yelled were cruel and mean, so I lived inside where I wasn't seen. But the world had changed in the blink of an eye. When hate fades away, that's where love resides. Though we may not agree, we stand side by side, so let's have a big parade. Well, the poofs and the fags and the queers are all gay, those testicles flying wherever they may. The lesbos are dancing to a tune from a flute, and everyone's laughing, we're having a hoot. The neighbors are waving, their cheers join in too, even the skies are happy, happy blue, and as the trannies and fairies prance by the crowd, love is our anthem and our banner held proud. I once lived in a world between, where the world was blue and I was green, and the names they yelled were cruel and mean, so I lived inside where I wasn't seen. My, how the world has changed. Thank you so much.
Well, hello there. Hello. That's right, my name is Stephen Norvik, and I would like to read 2 poems for you tonight. The first one is entitled Drums. Loud, so loud, I felt the locomotive pass through me. I felt the buffalo stampede beside me. The dust settles slow as the kettle drum strikes still blow, hammering upon the skin of ceremony, tradition, time, survival, culture. Thunder fills this theater with a throbbing tempest, accompanying a wail that heals, prays, begs the creator to come down and join the jam. Thank you. And one more, entitled Hamlet Never. Hamlet never rode a roller coaster. Hamlet never wore a Hawaiian shirt, suntanned, drank beer from an aluminum can, watched music videos, probably watched fires, but with or without marshmallows? Read the Bible in Danish. Hamlet never slung hash, burned his hands in a deep fryer, took LSD, drove a truck down back roads drunk, though he probably would have had mead. Hamlet never played baseball, basketball, football, volleyball, lacrosse, soccer, cricket, badminton, tennis, golf, darts, billiards, poker, Monopoly, Scrabble, cribbage, solitaire, Risk, pinball. Hamlet never paid late on his credit card or had overdue library fines, an orthodontist appointment, a driving exam, an urge to visit the British Museum, or fly a World War I airplane. Would he have chosen a Sopwith Camel or Fokker triplane? Hamlet likely never had small domesticated animals for pets. As a child, though, he was a prince. He could have had anything he wanted, excluding the chance to fly in zero-gravity conditions, sweat in a room without air conditioning, witness a hurricane, play the classic Telecaster 6-string, and really slamming that whammy bar, or even seeing the Beatles at Shea Stadium. Now, Hamlet never turned his computer off, then on again to fix it, complained of Sunday drivers, gotten lost in a shopping mall, played mini golf, or stayed up late walking along the parapets with his neck cranked skywards, watching for meteors. That's dispensable thinking, I'm thinking. Now, I can see him opening Pleiades, seducing other Ophelias in other towns, Polonius filing a paternity suit or an injunction. Boys will be boys even with swords. Hamlet never tossed a hand grenade or a frisbee, never cut it as a team member for a trivia contest, tried bingo, or watched the 6 o'clock news without talking back to the TV, especially during the weather segments. Hamlet never complained of getting hickeys from Ophelia, not that we know of, or went camping with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, or bowling with Laertes. Didn't have to kill chickens or gut fish, delete photos from his phone, go to a drive-in movie, rebel without a cause, anyone? He didn't play Sudoku, order his online favorite NFL team jersey, or listen to Led Zeppelin. Hamlet never was played by James Dean. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? All right, I think you all met me earlier, but I'm Mary Walls, and I'm going to be reading from my book, Firebrand. So I'm going to read from chapter 1, but I'm not going to start at the beginning of chapter 1. Just going to give you a small bit of context here so you know where I'm dropping you into the middle of. They are celebrating Banishing Day, which is the annual celebration of the banishing of magic from their kingdom. And Saray, my main character, has just gotten in a big fight with some other students at the annual Banishing Day dinner and has stormed off. And this is where we find her. Hang on. Okay, there we are. As soon as I cleared the doors, I broke away from Trina and began to run. I flew down the long, high-ceilinged halls, hot tears brimming in my eyes. By the time I reached the grand entry hall, with its curved staircases and massive chandelier, I could barely see through my tears. And perhaps that's why I collided with Walter. I hit him head on and then stumbled backwards, my books and boots and candy flying from my basket and landing all over the polished wood floor. I stared at the mess, momentarily dazed, and then looked at Walter. Walter had dropped his broom when I ran into him, but he was ignoring it in favor of picking up my fallen books, placing them in the crook of his maimed arm, his sleeve hanging loosely where the stump of his right forearm ended. I grabbed my basket and began scrambling around on the floor, collecting pieces of candy, my cheeks burning. What happened? Trina had just arrived in the foyer, her pace somewhat slowed by having to navigate the halls using only her cane. Now she was standing in the doorway, head cocked. It's fine. I just ran into Walter and dropped my basket, I mumbled. The door to Mr. Jeffrey's office was open, and I threw a nervous glance in its direction, wondering if I was going to earn a lecture for leaving dinner early. Oh! Trina turned and stared vaguely in the direction of where Walter was working. Hi, Walter! She chirped. Trina was one of the only students who was always kind to our janitor. Walter let out his strange, throaty chuckle, the only way he could communicate with Trina, and I tried not to cringe. He'd collected all my books and my boots and was standing over me. I finished picking up my candy, got to my feet, and took my gifts from him. Thanks, I muttered. Walter nodded and picked up his broom, and then turned back to me and cocked his head. I didn't miss the concern in his dark eyes, but any true gratitude I might have felt was overshadowed by a darker emotion as I looked at the rest of his face. Walter couldn't have been much older than Mr. Jeffries. His hair was still dark, save for a few glints of gray in his beard. But his face was prematurely lined from years of hardship, his cheeks oddly sunken, his shoulders bent. Removal of the right hand and tongue, and a lifetime of hard labor, was the sentence given to offending magic users, Mr. Jeffries had reminded us in his speech. The amputations kept them from casting, though I only partially understood how this worked. The second part of their sentence, hard labor, was a source of confusion for me. Rumor had it that most cross mages were sold to the wealthy as slaves, but I'd never heard any talk from my rich classmates about owning one. Walter, for whatever reason, had been bought by the school and had been a fixture here as long as I could remember. Crossmage, I learned in my history class, meant shattered mage in Sharonese. It was a fitting description. Now, looking up at him, my stomach knotted. I tried not to shudder. I'm fine, I told him, annoyance creeping into my voice. Thanks for helping me. I should go. Then I turned and fled the entryway, trying not to think about Walter's sad eyes or the things that had happened to make him who he was. My stomach was still in knots 2 hours later. After we'd reached our room, Trina had spent the rest of the evening amusing herself with her pipe, and I had crawled into bed and tried and failed to read my book. My mind reeled with questions, the same questions that I'd had since I'd learned 6 years ago that my parents weren't likely actually dead. True orphans were rare at this school, Carrie had told me. Most of us were actually unwanted children whose parents had the decency and wealth to leave us somewhere where we'd be well cared for, instead of abandoning us to the streets or to one of the city's overcrowded orphanages. Most of the other kids knew this too, she explained, and this is why they were so cruel to us. Trina's breathing had begun to even out, and I stared out at the flickering candles, then at my hands, remembering how hard I'd had to fight the burning on my palms earlier. I need to get this under control, and the only way to do that, I figured, was through practice. My gaze returned to the candles. Flamina finita, I whispered, the familiar string of syllables as I willed the candles in the room to go out. All obeyed without hesitation. I glanced over to make sure Trina was definitely asleep, and then spoke another phrase, Nala le renare flamina. I watched as a small, fist-sized ball of flame appeared in front of me. I turned it over and over in the air, caused it to grow and shrink a few times, then extinguished it with the first set of words I'd used. This, of course, was the other reason I hated Banishing Day. I lay back down, my thoughts returning to my parents once again. Maybe they abandoned me because they knew. My talents hadn't shown up until I was 11, but I had to wonder if perhaps they had looked down at their infant daughter and somehow seen what she would become, a freak who could control flame. Maybe I was dangerous, and that was the real reason I was an orphan.
Hello, I'm Sean Hannibury. I'm a local poet, artist, musician. I'm just going to read a quick poem here. Circles, spirals, patterns of being, all my emotion, the upset part, the storm wheel of sadness, creation regardless. Find my pattern, be my ocean of devotion, be my school. Let my radio fingers play stray cats. Play this video, show me tomorrow. How I get here in this pink world, let me down gently, bring me up high, show me all the time that is passing by. Show me the white blue milk truck downstairs, downstream, down the street, I forget details, how I live alone, an adventure in the colors. I take my time to make sense, all sorts of going by. Elevator, bring me up high, interest, bring me some pie in a coffee cup when the world is erupting. When I find myself interrupted, I who lives my life on the edge, who shows the pink-orange sunrise, alligator, shower cap, escalator eyes. Reach out to grab the sun-kissed orange prayers before bed. Information, radio waves hypnotize me, make my eyes strange, intricate, push the button for the door to open. This is not my sidewalk, this is not my ankle. Warm showers, blue dye, I don't want to come around at all. Above the city where the birds fly, around the city from a bird's eye view, I miss you, imagination, light, realizer. Make a friend out of me with decorated shoes that show a soft side of your soul. This is a taste of lost lips, who I wait for, diary writer, express tired emotions. Mistaken maker, don't make a mistake, show me the right road to get to the right place. Show me all, every corner that you have lived on, live wire, short temper. Don't light my fuse, I let my eyes rest upon you. Moon sleeper, heart tingles with delightful new life. Outdoors surprise, nature eyes, know the valleys, the flat dirt road. I know the birth child born inside hunger as I roll over dreaming that maybe you are here. Thank you.
I'll try and melt my glasses. I'll maybe make this a little higher first. So I think I get the privileged position of the last open mic reader tonight. So is there somebody else there? No? Last man standing. All right. Okay, I want to read from my latest book, Something Else Altogether, a collection of short stories that's been accumulating over about the last 20 years of my life. And I'm just going to read the last couple of pages of a story called The Way We Carry the Dead. And it's a very autobiographical story about a family reunion I went to in St. John's, Newfoundland in 2000. And the situation is we're all standing at the gravestone of my grandfather, who early on in his life, well, I guess midlife, he lost the lower part of one leg. He was a carpenter and he got hurt at work. And as a result of that, my father ended up at the age of 14 as the oldest son, being the breadwinner of the family, having to drop out of school and go to work. So the story is kind of about, trying to understand the effect of intergenerational trauma, I guess, and how it impacted my family and myself. So. And here now, facing the grave of my grandfather, I wonder if this is the legacy I've inherited, the legacy of grief and loss. And who, if not the Newfoundlanders, have known the pain of that deep cutting, the losses by fire, the losses to the sea, the losses of their sons and daughters to a large and anonymous mainland. And if this Newfie blood is mine as it is, I must carry something of that loss in me. It's a long way to cut through a man's leg. But how much farther is it through a human heart, and how much deeper and longer lasting is the ache engendered by that cutting? Suddenly a child has slipped away. 4-year-old Connor, a curly-headed kid with dark eyes and a knack for disappearing, has lit out through the tombstones while we adults sat staring at the grave, lost in our thoughts. We fan out, form a loose line across the cemetery and make a rapid sweep toward the water, calling and calling as we go, hoping against hope that he hasn't made it to the water's edge. An old woman stops planting bright orange marigolds on a gravesite and joins the search, though we are strangers to her. I struggle to tamp down the panic that tries to rise in my throat. I recall a similar search in 1984, calling and calling my sister-in-law's name, but never to any avail. How many years we passed scanning every copse of trees and wondering before the search moved deeper into the far fields of our dreams, where it still carries on. Connor, I call out, and I'm surprised at the desperation in my voice. We move faster now, hoping to make the water ahead of him. How long was he gone before we noticed? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, long enough to make it to the ocean? For sure, and I'm running as a part of the adult me has always been running through the tombstones, calling for a lost child, calling as though it were my lost child. I cross into the lowlands my cousin Francis called the Valley of Death, where the cholera victims were buried, and my foot sinks into soft earth on one of the graves. I flash on a colleague's funeral just weeks before, see the broomstick arms, the shaved straight sides of the grave cut through clay where his coffin was lowered. In the dense humidity of the air, I can almost hear my father's last sighing breath before the great peace descended. The word abandoned suddenly rises in my throat. and snags there like a jagged stick caught in a whirlpool. With still no sign of that elusive child, I run through the valley of death, half aware of how life presents its metaphors so perfectly sometimes. I run as if death itself were on my heels, as though the dead below me might suddenly reach up to hold me, until at last I am through that valley, and another cry is going up. We have found him. The old woman who was planting marigolds on the gravesite has found Connor, crying amongst the tombstones, has found the child crying in the graveyard. We pass him from embrace to embrace, the relief flowing out of us as he is handed down the family line from cousin to second cousin, from uncle to distant aunt. By the time he lands on my hip, he is grinning and the tears have practically dried. Is it just me, or is the air somehow brighter now as we reunite in the parking lot, prepare to leave this cemetery behind, return to the easy laughter? Then it comes to me, this image of my father doubled over, laughing as he often did, and not just a deep chuckle, but a full body laugh. When he laughed, he put his whole soul into it, and his laughter carried everyone with it. He once said that when he died, he wanted to be put in his casket buck naked and arse up so his friends could properly kiss him goodbye. Then he roared at the sight of our stunned faces. After supper that night, the Hanleys from away are inducted into the Royal Order of Screechers by the Sheik of the East, a local guy with a stubbly beard, black-rimmed glasses, and a tea towel thonged onto his head with a rawhide shoelace. He has us kneel to partake in the sacred ritual. With the onlookers laughing hysterically, we take turns kissing the carcass of a filleted codfish, then share in the final communion, a square of salt fish washed down with a shot of screech, the thick black rum the Newfies used to drain from the bottom of the oak casks imported from the Barbados. I don't suppose you have any non-alcoholic screech for the teetotalers, I ask from my knees. Non-alcoholic screech? Replies the incredulous Sheik. That would be squeak, he quips, and the hall erupts with laughter again. And surely this is part of that legacy too, that Newfie sense of humor, that spontaneous flow of wit and mirth spawned and refined over the centuries, around kitchen tables and parlor stoves, over glasses of beer and shots of rum, in the dories bobbing on the heaving seas and in the punts plying the flat ponds. True, on the surface this place is all hardness and rock, but inside is all softness and heart. And in the air, yes, that assurance in the face of all fires and death and disaster, that stamped in stone certainty of laughter and endurance and perpetual care, that love which plants the brightest flowers on each and every grave. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming tonight. It's really been great to see things get launched on the right foot, and here's to many more of these events. Colton's going to just come up and say a few words. But again, I just want to say thank you to all of you for coming, and thank you to Colton for having this brainchild and making it come to fruition, and let's make it an event every month.
Thanks, Derek. So the next one is July 7th, I believe, on a Thursday. Same time, same place. Bring your friends. It's free. And so share it around. We'll also be posting clips and all that as well. I'd like to thank Derek for showing up today, and it's always a pleasure to see him. I'd also like to thank Robbie for her music and everybody else who performed at the open mic. Special thanks to Winter and his journey to go to Emily Carr. And to Mary for her book and her wonderful stories as well. I have exclusive access to her old books, just in case if you all wanted to see them. I'm kidding. Thanks to Peter and Julian for their book as well. And thank you to all you guys for coming over here. All the books will be at Mobius, so if you read them, enjoy them, if you want to grab them, you can get them from there. You can get them from our website, which is www.rcn.media. As well as we are also looking for people to feature here. I have a large catalog of authors, but I'd love to hear from the community to see what you guys have, and they can go on to the creativegrove.ca and you guys can submit. I would love to have more people on here that's outside of our business. And we'll also work with those people if they can't get their stock of books in to have a good stock here, so that way they can get some of their books sold and people can read them. Before I end off, do you guys have any questions? Perfect. All right, that's what I'd like to see. So July 7th, first Thursday of every month. Please don't forget about it. And then don't forget about Electric Mermaid too. I believe that's the fourth Wednesday. Derek, do you know? Yeah, last Wednesday of the month. So don't forget to do that one. And also don't forget about us. Like I said, it's free. So I'd love to see all these seats and even more rows, as well as people online. It's going to be streamed every time. We'll be doing remote features as well with a big TV and a webcam on top. So that way they get the experience of actually being here, but without spending $500,000 on gas to come. All right, thanks.